we're pouring water into a bathtub that has a giant hole ripped in the bottom.
So one of the things that's said about people in their low to mid-20s, it's like it's the me generation, a little bit like selfish. Are you finding that?
Well, I actually think that many of them have integrated a sense of purpose into what they imagine for themselves professionally. What constitutes a good job is different these days. It's around building something, it's around working with a team of people that you respect and admire, it's around trying to solve a collective problem or achieve a collective goal.
What's the end game for what you guys have accomplished? It's young, but if you're to sort of envision a legacy.
My goal is not that everyone goes to work for a startup, because that's simplistic and not realistic.
Right.
My goal is that people do that which they're wired to do. So that if someone genuinely wants to build an enterprise of value, that they're doing that in Detroit or Cincinnati or New Orleans or wherever.
Interesting. So presumably the VFA is part of that solution, but presumably there are also other elements to it. There's the way that secondary education organizes itself. There's policy reforms. Can you speak to some of those different elements that need movement in order to achieve the vision?
A lot of what happens with young people and the choices they make is determined by the options that are presented and by the resources that are brought to bear, making their next steps possible. In the US, if you graduated from a national university, like I did, or you did and many others, there's around an 89% chance that you've done nothing but go to school except for your summers by the time you're 22.
Right.
So if that's your system of training, then what's like the natural next step? The natural next step is to find the next
institution that you jump into. Yeah,
because all you've done at that point is go through institutions. If we want to change this, what we need to do is introduce some ex-institution time somewhere in there, either a gap year between high school and college, something to break up the current set of environments.
Why does the country need this right now? Why is VFA so vital?
The spirit of enterprise that's built this country is right now, in our view, flagging a little bit, in part because of the evolution of our economy and the structural forces that have come into play. The proportion of Americans, for example, that work for companies that have 500 people or less has been declining over the last couple of decades. And these small companies are the ones that are the most economically productive in terms of patents and growth and job creation.
Right.
And so if we want more of our talent to be founding these growth companies or startups that are going to help drive opportunities over the next generation, we have to help make it so. We can't simply, like close our eyes, put our hands under our seats and say, nature will take care of it for us.
Andrew, it's been a thrill to have you here with Nationswell, and wish you a lot of luck.
Yes. So the great thing about a value-added tax too in other societies is you can actually make it fall more heavily on certain luxury purchases and exempt certain consumer staples. Like my proposal assumes that you have like a blanket rate, but you can very easily exempt things that people rely upon for day-to-day uses or have like a lower rate. So the goal would be to have it so that people have more resources in their families and communities, and that we're getting the money from where the money is.
You try to get, the lighting makes it, looking for a hand way in the back, or at least as close as I can. I'll keep looking. I see a gentleman in a blue shirt back there. Yes, you.
Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States and directly affects either as people that have the disease or family members that help care for them, about 100,000 Granite Staters. So if you're elected, what would you do to address Alzheimer's?
Yeah, I have friends whose parents have been struggling with Alzheimer's as well. And my brother's research touches on some of the elements of the disease. So big picture, we need to do much, much more for aging Americans generally, and Alzheimer's obviously like a component of that. And that's the way we, in my opinion, need to move our entire economy. Because right now the problem we have right now is we have GDP as our measuring stick, and then we see people with Alzheimer's as like cost centers essentially. You know what I mean? We see our children as cost centers. And the problem is that GDP is going to drive us off a cliff, because if you have self-driving trucks, going to be great for GDP and it's going to be terrible for humans. It's going to be terrible for humans in New Hampshire. So the goal is to actually make it so that our health and well-being and our mental health and the health of our seniors is actually the measuring stick that we have for our economy, and then we can move huge levels of resources in that direction. Because if you have loved ones who are suffering from Alzheimer's, sometimes like it's very, very expensive. The managed care insurance might not be able to handle a lot of it. So I would be all for helping make those resources much more robust and seeing caring for those families as a public obligation.
So universal basic income. My initial knee-jerk reaction was, get the fuck out of here.
I'm immensely grateful to everyone who's gotten this campaign to this point, and you haven't seen nothing yet. I mean, we're going to go very, very far together.